Okay, so in this video, I'm going to do my best to kind of talk you through these different fields. I'm just kind of checking right now to make sure this is within the range of the picture. And then to kind of get used to, or like give you an idea of how to fill in these fields. Let's see if I can make that a little better. This is pretty normal format for me when I'm like teaching virtually. So at the top it says, for this quick reference, the goal here is just that you're reading over the definition, even though it's been clipped a little bit, and you should have already watched the video so that you already have kind of an idea of what these elements are and what they mean. There is also a resource for you on the back, but because it's in black and white and it's copy machine, this isn't the best resource, I wouldn't say. So again, and with any of these assignments, given that they're online, feel free to go ahead and look them up online. If there's anything you're not understanding past the resources that I've given you, that would be the expectation. So we're going to cover each of these elements in an individual unit or multiple units throughout the semester. But let me go ahead and get into what you're supposed to do for this. So it says, draw multiple examples, varieties, or types for each of the elements. So multiple examples, and sometimes it specifies. So like for line, it says a line is the path of a point moving through space. So that's its definition. And then it says draw a variety of 8 different types of lines: thick and thin, curvy and wavy, straight and jagged. So again, I mean, you can start out drawing curvy line, and then maybe you draw a thicker curvy line. So like maybe I do the same one, but instead of it being just thin, like maybe it varies in thickness. That is okay to do. Like you can get more creative than that, or you can, be more straightforward. I could do a dashed line. I could do all different kinds of lines. So 8 different types of lines with a variety of explanations there for line. For shape, it says draw geometric and organic shapes. So geometric is going to be like something made by a machine. So like your standard, triangles, rectangles. Organic is going to be like something that can be derived from nature. So an organic shape could honestly just be like something that's free form because, none of nature, sorry, they're like, if you're seeing my hands, because the bugs are like starting to swarm me now, the mosquitoes. But like it could be more free form, or it could be something actually inspired by nature, like a leaf, for example, or whatever it is that you might draw. But do make sure it's a closed shape. So I didn't close the shape there. I don't want that to be confusing. Okay. Then for form is all about something being 3-dimensional. So it says shade 3-dimensional object. You guys haven't learned shading yet, but I'm going to go ahead and kind of talk to you about it. So for making this circle look 3-dimensional, you can look it up online. So you could put shaded sphere is probably what you would search for online. Or you can just kind of follow my example. You want to think about where your light source is. So let's say my sun is over here. That would make this plane on the sphere the brightest area. That would be more my highlight. So I'm going to start on this side with my darkest or heaviest pressure. And I'm just using a pencil here, and I'm going to let up as I work toward that area. But with a circle, because the side, like it's a rounded object, or a sphere rather, it's a rounded object. As I wrap around, it's still going to be dark on some of the edges until I start getting closer to that highlight. And then it will, and I'm just kind of layering, and I'm going to let up more and more with my pressure, like let up with my hand. And you might need to go back in and erase if you get too dark the first time with your shading. And even like sometimes people will tend to like make it dark all the way around and then make more of a light spot here in the center. And then I'm going to go over the darker areas and just make sure it gets like extra dark so you can tell a difference, because it should fade from like darker to lighter. And then down here on the bottom as well. And then for the rectangle, it says turn the rectangle into a cube with perspective lines. So your perspective lines are like drawing it 3-dimensionally, but you don't necessarily have to shade it. So what you're going to do is you're going to create 3 lines when you're drawing a rectangular form in perspective that all have the same angle. So like they should all be headed in the same direction, so the same angle. So if I draw this direction, like I can place my pencil along to see if they're at the same angle. And yeah, my pencil didn't have to tilt, so they're all at the same angle. And then I'm going to create a twin angle with like this original shape. So like this tall vertical, I'm going to do the same thing right here. this horizontal vertical, I'm going to do the same thing right here. And that will give me that three-dimensional cube. If you wanted to shade it, you would shade one side really dark. The other side would be kind of medium. And then the third side for a flat-sided object would be like the lightest plane. And you know, you could make it kind of fade if you want to where it like gets darker the further it is from the lightest plane. That would be fine too if you want to practice your shading. For color, you need some sort of color medium. So you could use crayons, you could use markers. I just happen to have pastels. The primary colors are going to be red, and I don't really care. You don't need to be perfect with filling it in. Red, blue, and yellow. The secondary colors are going to be orange, green. It's kind of a light green, but oh well. And violet. And complementary colors are colors that work together in really good color schemes. So your complementary colors are going to be side by side. So you'll do purple and yellow together. So you're actually going to draw them side by side. So I'm just kind of doing that off to the side on my page. I'm going to do red and green. Those are complements, and we'll get into this more later, guys. So if you're like, I don't really understand the whole complement thing, no worries. Remember, this is a quick reference. So you'll come back to this, and we're just kind of creating that right now. I'm running out of daylight, so I'm moving kind of quick. Blue and orange. There you go. And those are your complements, or at least your primary, secondary complements. For value, this is where you're shading and you're showing all of the lightness, darkness range. And so I'm going to start with my mid-tone because then I can always let up on my pressure or get heavier with my pressure. So with my mid-tone, I'm going to create kind of a middle gray. My pencil isn't prepped really well, and I am shading on a picnic table, which is not optimal surface to be working on, but it is what it is. All right, so now I'm going to go ahead and go lighter with my pressure. So I'm going to go to medium light. I'm going to let up with my pressure. It should, if I squint at it, it should look like a lighter shade than my mid-tone. And then for my lightest shade, I'm like barely going to do any pressure at all, which turns out is kind of hard to do with this pencil. If I notice, like right now, I'm like, okay, there's a big difference between my mid-tone and my medium light, but my lightest shade and my medium light are like almost the same. So I'm going to go over this medium light again with really light pressure just to make it barely darker. So you can gradually see a shift. I'll go to my medium dark. And I want to go back over the top of that with another layer to make it a little bit darker. And then my darkest, I really want to press down. And I'm starting to, like, I got it on my hand, the pastel, it's starting to go everywhere now. So this is a little sloppy, but you can at least see the like gradual progression. As I'm looking back over this, I'm like, okay, maybe I should have gone a little bit darker with my mid-tone so I had more room with my light range. I can always just go right over the top. But when you turn this in, I should see a gradual progression from light to dark. And there should be a definite difference among all of your values. Okay? All right. So actually I have two more. Space and perspective. And it says here, left, shade the positive space. So the positive space is going to be the hands. So I'm going to fill in the hands on the left. And then the right is shade the negative space. That's going to be my background. So I'm going to shade the background. At the bottom, it says texture. How a thing feels or appears to feel. So you guys are going to create a texture, and it says draw 3 different textures. So an actual texture would be like the way something actually feels. An invented texture would be something that's kind of totally made up, and then a simulated texture would be one that's like supposed to look like it has the feeling of something that you can identify. So for example, I like textures can come in many shapes and forms. So maybe I draw like a series of dots to create texture. You could get the idea of how this would feel. Like if this was actually a texture, you can identify like how those dots would feel. Maybe I would do a series of like hair-like strokes. You could think of anything that like you can feel. So you might want to look around your room and think about it like, what does that texture feel like? Is it smooth? Is it shiny? You're trying to recreate that. So like, I'm kind of doing these like weird hair-like strokes until it looks like not just randomly, but I'm wanting it to kind of look like I could kind of get an idea of like what this might feel like. The lighter you press, the more light it's going to feel and soft. The heavier you press, the heavier it's going to feel. And then for my last texture, maybe I'm going to do something more severe, or maybe I'll even use like the wood grain, but maybe I, shade in or kind of make my lines a little bit more jagged. This is still texture. I mean, it still kind of has a vibe, especially if it's next to something like really smooth. So I'll show you the difference. Like if I shade really soft on the other side of it, this is going to appear more smooth next to this texture, which is more like jagged and harsh over here. So really, it's just kind of playing around with like how to make something look like it feels different. Like this looks like it feels different from this and from this if it were in an artwork. And again, those video resources are really going to help. That's about it. So please feel free to reach out over Schoology if you have questions. Remind is not currently working for me, so just disregard that for right now. We'll stick to Schoology messages for all of our communication. Have a great day, and again, I'll be in touch.